Welcome to the Security Weekly News Wrap-Up for the week of 3 April 2022. It's already April. How about that? We've got Rants, always, Burnout, VMware, Microsoft, Android, HIMEM.SYS, if you know what that is, Parrot, all this and show wrap-ups on the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Cybercriminals are working overtime. Last year in the fourth quarter alone, phishing attacks disguised as COVID testing information increased by 521%. Barracuda has identified 13 types of email threats and how cybercriminals use them to steal money from your company or personal information from your employees and customers. Find out about the 13 email threat types and how Barracuda can provide complete email protection for your teams, your customers, and your reputation. Get your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Monitoring and maintaining compliance is a never-ending struggle with a high price of failure. Firemon helps customers meet complex and varying compliance requirements. Firemon has fully customizable reporting, analytics, assessments, and dashboards to meet the compliance needs of any organization. With Firemon, compliance reports take a tenth of the time, and real-time continuous compliance eliminates the anxiety and headaches of audit preparation. Improve security outcomes by improving security operations with Firemon. Visit securityweekly.com/Firemon to learn more.
All right, I'm Doug White from Roger Williams University, and this is the Security Weekly News Wrap-Up Show, episode 202. On Application Security Weekly number 191, John and Mike had Eric Allard, the CTO at SWN, on the show. The segment was about how to package software to make developers' lives easier in regards to security. So a very relevant segment. I mean, we always keep talking about all these kind of things in the real world and all these libraries and all this other kind of SDKs. I got several stories about SDKs and libraries as ever. And so certainly an interesting segment. And in the second segment, they had AppSec News. On Business Security Weekly number 257, Ben, Jason, and Tyler had Jonathan Ghostin, the Director of Technical Marketing and Security at HP, on the show. Jonathan was talking about how to create endpoint isolation, and in particular, how endpoint isolation can improve overall risk management, reduce the complexity of environments with multiple solutions and agents, and improve user experience and productivity. And I mean, that's another biggie that a lot of people are talking about now, about how do you do this? And it's very interesting to me on how to manage that, because it's a really hard thing to do. In the second segment, the Business Security News. On Enterprise Security Weekly 268, Adrian and Tyler Shields had Josh Snow on. Josh is the principal sales engineer at ExtraHop, and they were talking about recent CISA. CISA put out a thing called the Shields Up Advisory, and they wanted to talk about how to deal with this practically. Because, and I'm not criticizing CISA. I'm glad they're there and they do a great job. But a lot of times we see things like, shields up, and, defend yourself and all these kind of things that are very easy to say, but they're a lot harder to actually do. And so they were talking about how to deal with this practically in this advice that CISA had released, as the increasing amount of cyber conflict continues to rise. They also talked about specific practices and protocols that you probably should be shoring up, and some indicators that would signal active exploitation attempts. So a really good segment to tune into. In the second segment, Catherine Ullman, the Senior Information Security Forensic Analyst at the University of Buffalo. That segment was about, and again, a really great segment, cross-training in offensive and defensive techniques, and about how not to get in a silo, and how learning the tools of the other side is really an important part. And they were particularly talking about blue team defender type roles, but how understanding, and all of us have said this for years, is that you kind of have to understand offense to play defense. And if you don't, you're going to be really at a disadvantage. They talked about how to get started with offensive tools and techniques, how to stay away from dependence on tools. We see that a lot. You just want to push a button and have it say yes. And they talked about how attackers think. So a very relevant sort of thing for all of the defenders out there. In the third segment, they had the Enterprise Security News. On Security Weekly News number 201, Jason talked about how WebLogic crypto miner malware has been disabling Alibaba cloud monitoring tools. So a fun little thing there if you're interested in that kind of stuff. And on Paul's Security Weekly number 735, first up was Sean Metcalf, the founder and CTO at Trimark. Sean was on talking about how attackers are targeting access control systems like Active Directory, Azure AD, and Okta. That's where everything's gone because everybody's using some kind of access control manager now for the most part. Gone are the days where we just had, like a Linux server sitting there with local accounts on it. Everybody's using something. And so, of course, attackers are going after those somethings because that's where the goodies are. In the second segment, Jay Beal, the CEO at InGuardians, was on. That segment was about Kubernetes architecture and how it may not be as secure as you might like. Kubernetes always is a very popular subject, with Dockers and containers being very, very popular today. They talked about Pirates, free workshops, and the DEF CON CTF, a whole bunch of stuff that was all related to Kubernetes. And they talked about the training that Jay does, which is attack and defense related to Kubernetes. So if you're using Kubernetes at all, or you're using containers and you're thinking about using Kubernetes, this is a great segment for you to check out. And in the third segment, they had the security news. So my thread of the week is going to go back to the well about phishing. And I know that's old news, and phishing's been around since some medieval prince sent a scroll promising to help you out with a lot of doubloons. If you just send a king's signet ring for a couple of days, really. And I'm not really going to talk about phishing, really, but I really want to talk about something related to phishing and the article that I attached, which was about new phishing techniques and so on. And I really wanted to talk about credentials. And I know I've talked about that before. We just don't have a sound method to prevent credential stuffing and phishing attacks. I mean, everybody out there, it works for any company that has more than a few employees, and probably even the smallest companies and even individuals, has been trained by now. I mean, I'm sure all of you have been trained in anti-phishing, and you've had to sit through the little animated tutorial about phishing, and you probably get the fake phishing emails from the company, fake phishing machine that checks to see if people are getting phished. And, probably even down at the nursing home for old programmers, they probably taught you to look for that little padlock on the URL bar so you can tell if the cert is valid. Look at the address, hover the mouse over the address, over the link, and see if the address matches what you think it does. Go directly to the site. All that typical stuff that every single IT training that you've had to do every year for years and years and years. I mean, we all have to do them. We all do them. We all sit there and go, okay, yeah, I got to sit through this 30-minute thing. But credentials are just meant to be stolen. I mean, they are. This article was talking about how Azure State web apps are being used to target Microsoft users with pages that have a padlock in the URL bar. Why? Because there's a wildcard cert in Azure static apps that you can use to do that. So this is a flaw, obviously, but it is a flaw that exists, and all these things are out there. And so by using that wildcard cert, you can generate a cert for a similar site underneath it. And that means that these landing pages that they're using for phishing can have valid certs, because guess what? The cert is valid under that wildcard, and that means the little padlock is up there. So, if you add to that all the things that we've been reading about and reporting on now for months and months and years, things like transparent reverse proxies, which allow you to circumvent, the old panacea of two-factor authentication tokens. Well, you've got a situation where all the training and all the verbiage that we've spent, all the money we've spent in the last 5 years is just kind of tossed out the window, because at the end of the day, passwords suck. I mean, you think about your current guidance. Basically you have a separate password for every single site that you visit. Each one has to have 16 characters, upper and lowercase, special symbols, and not the question mark, because that would be bad, but other ones, yes. And they can't be representations of anything that makes any sense, and you have to change them every 15 minutes, and it's a violation if you write them down or use the same one anytime within the last 7 years. And we've cut the help desk budget, so if you do forget your password, well, you'll need to use our secret 3 questions that ask for your pet's name, your mother's maiden name, and the length of your paternal grandfather's left index finger. I mean, no way that system's ever going to break down, right? Now, add to it, what is the best way to get these things from someone? I mean, so let's just go back to the same old circle of how do we get these secret things from somebody? Do you need jumper cables on a truck battery? I mean, that might work, but no, it's really simple. Just ask for them. I mean, I was doing this in the 80s. We were calling people and asking them for their credentials, and guess what? 4 of the people would go, bite me. But that 5th person would go, oh, wow, that's terrible. Let me get that for you. I've got it written down on a sheet of paper here. I mean, I've done pen tests where we actually got the passwords off of the wall that were written on a sheet of paper by looking through the window with a little, with binoculars. I mean, now send people to a page that says you need to reset your password because it was hacked and it's got the padlock. Put up an internet quiz. I'll bet you can't spell your mother's maiden name backwards before this timer counts down to 0. Go. Amaze your friends. I mean, this doesn't even begin to get into the stuff like shared passwords, shared admin accounts, or the fact that it's just a year or two more that in just another year or two, 60% of the population is going to be over the age of 60 and doesn't know how to use the Tic Tac or whatever these kids today are doing instead of huffing paint out in the woods like we did in the good old days. No way. I mean, so long as there's an identifier and that identifier is not unique to you in some irreproducible manner, somebody's going to get that identifier. Thumbprints? Well, cut off some thumbs. Oh, no, the thumb has to be body temp to work on the scanner. That's why you got a microwave in your car. I don't know. I mean, I guess it ends up looking like Gattaca, which was an old movie. And in the Gattaca movie, everybody's DNA has to be mapped to the last strand, and you have to give up a drop of blood to go into the bathroom stall. But even in that dystopian vision, you could still get around it by carrying around, Ethan Hawke's carrying around clean DNA samples with him, and he's tricking the blood test. And I know it's just a movie, but I think we're really going to have to at some point just assume that no matter how much money we spend on training and warnings and newscasts, well, people are going to be people. And someone is going to have 19 shots of Kettle One and get their DNA strand stolen by a plunger man, and I made that term up, a plunger man with a needle in some alley off 24th Street, and here we go again. I mean, I don't really think you can stop it. So pretty much everybody has access to something, and that something can then be used as a single sign-on for something else. And we get closer to that all the time, right? Because even at the same time we're worried about this and freaking out, we keep pushing towards single sign-on. Control your whole life through Google Chrome. I mean, that kid you knew in high school that was huffing kerosene all the time off an old dirty rag only has 9 brain cells left right about now. But even that person probably has a login to something somewhere, and they probably don't have a lot of resistance to phishing attacks. So some of you smart types need to think up something new and send me a Tesla X when you make a lot of money off of it. I don't mean that cheap one either. I want the one with the carbon fiber wheels, all that. I want the cannibal psycho driving mode. Yeah, I want that. And the custom paint job. I mean, don't be cheap. Come on. You just made $1 billion off your solution. So go out there, get busy, and make a whole bunch of money off this. I mean, I'm sorry. Solve society's problems and make the world a better place. Yeah. And now the news. So a set of applications on the Google Play Store collected sensitive user data and have over 45 million installs, right? At last count. These apps were collecting data through a third-party SDK, which can capture clipboard content, GPS data, email addresses, phone numbers, MAC addresses, and network SSIDs. Now, I don't know about you, but clipboards have a lot of stuff on them, and they can have PIN numbers, they can have multi-factor authentication, et cetera. They can also include your wallet recovery seeds for your crypto, passwords, PIN numbers, credit card numbers. I don't know what all might be on somebody's clipboard, and it probably shouldn't be being captured and uploaded to your own account, let alone it probably shouldn't be stored in some third-party database. Yeah. AppSensus found this information and disclosed that the collected data was being uploaded to a domain called mobile.measurelib.com, which is owned by a Panama-based analytics firm. Always a sign of quality when you see Panama-based. But a Panama-based analytics firm called MSYS. Sorry, Panama. Panama is a beautiful place, but, But anyway, the company, this analytics company, says they tout their tools as a monetization opportunity for your app. And they went on and pointed out that their tool encrypts and uses base 64 obfuscation so that the data can't be seen being uploaded, which seems a little bit suspicious in and of itself, although you could argue that that's just protecting the data en route. But one of the things they pointed out about all this obfuscation was that every single transaction this thing did was having to do a whole bunch of stuff, and it was like draining the batteries of phones, if nothing else. The largest apps, and there was a whole list of apps that are using this, but the largest apps that were using it were Speed Camera Radar. I have no idea what that is. Almoizin Lite, never heard of it. Wi-Fi Mouse, nope. And QR and barcode scanners. That's that one you've seen probably. All those apps and a whole lot of other ones have been removed from the Play Store, but most of them were re-uploaded with the SDK removed so they could be legit. So if you already installed the SDK one that was there, well, it's still on your phone and it's still doing this. So you might want to reiterate advice to your people to keep their apps to a minimum, only install long-established apps that are from trustworthy developers and so forth. Now, that's really tough, right? Because when you really want that app that translate Russian menus from your camera, I mean, this really happened to me. I was in Russia a long time ago, not now, and I was sitting there in a restaurant, and I was like, I want to order, but the menu was in Russian, and my Russian wasn't so great, and I was really wanting something yummy, and it looked like they had some really good stuff. I downloaded an app, and I put it on my phone that like I could use the camera to look at the menu, and it would tell me what it said. It was really cool, and I be honest, I didn't spend a lot of time going, I wonder if this app was from a well-established publisher, and I'm going to go do some searches to see. I just installed it. Yeah, that's how you get in trouble. You know how that goes. VMware has issued a new warning for 5 critical vulnerabilities on Wednesday. They did patch all 5 of these, so it included, and all the details of these, if you want to read all the grim details of them, there was 3 remote code execution vulnerabilities and 2 authentication bypass vulnerabilities. So really bad stuff. The vulnerable products include VMware Workspace ONE Access, VMware Identity Manager, VMware vRealize Automation, VMware Cloud Foundation, and vRealize Suite Lifecycle Manager. So some pretty common products. VMware said there was no evidence of these being exploited in the wild before the advisory was published, but well, you know that drill. They did put workarounds on that advisory if you can't patch for some reason, and we all know patching VMware is not the easiest thing in the world, and having to bring your VMware systems offline to reboot and all that is, not just something you do at the drop of a hat. Yeah. Parrot is a traffic direction system, or a TDS, that uses servers which currently were being hosted by the servers they were on host 16,500 websites of universities, local governments, porn sites, and personal blog sites. TDS systems typically, if you aren't familiar with them, they identify people to a site, and they then can send the users to a site related to that's best suited to their needs. And I actually had written some jokes that involved porn sites, but I took them out for, to spare everybody. So the example I used instead was, like a Spanish language site for visitors that originated in Argentina. So you go to a website, and instead of getting the English page, you get a Spanish page because you're actually in Argentina. Sounds wholesome and useful, and I suppose it is. I mean, I would rather get the English language site when I go to a website than the, I don't know, what's the language I would have? Absolutely, the Finnish, the Finnish version of the website. And TDS sites are used by all kinds of marketing all the time. It sends you to the best version of the site based on the criteria that they use, and there's all kinds of things they can use. But Avast discovered this one called Parrot TDS was actually being used for a campaign called Fake Update, which, among other things, and it provides a remote access Trojan with a fake browser update notice. So it's one of those pages that when you try to go there, it says you need to update your browser immediately. And if you click the link, of course, you get a remote access Trojan installed. They said this had been running since at least February of 2022, but it may have been running as early as October of 2021. The Parrot TDS was found on a large number of sites, and basically the only thing they had in common was that they were poorly secured CMS sites. So, of course they are. I mean, and they were often WordPress, because guess what? Imagine that, a poorly secured CMS site at a university. It's hard to believe that somebody, would allow faculty members to put websites up, and that they wouldn't secure them properly. Yeah. I mean, this is like back when we used to find our login ports open in the good old days, right? And you're just like, ooh, look at that. But the servers are also pushing other things like phishing sites and other landing page redirects, which have all sorts of different malicious purposes. So if you are running websites or you're allowing people in your organization to put up WordPress or any other type of CMS sites, you might want to do some scans. You may want to put out some documentation and set some hygiene standards, or you're probably going to end up involved in this stuff because it seems to be going that way. Now, you know, and I know that you know that I know, and Microsoft knows for sure, that the only thing most people use Edge for is to install something else. It's kind of like that. You remember that little robot that Rick built, that was like just to butter his toast, and the poor little robot is doing the toast, and it says, "What's my purpose?" And Rick goes, "To do that." And the robot just kind of hangs its head, and you sort of feel sorry for it. And Edge is sitting there chirping away, telling you how much better it is than all the other browsers, and why won't you just give me a chance as you click through to install Brave? In Windows 11, apparently, it is really, really difficult to update your default browser in the default version. Apparently, according to this article, Microsoft changed that feature in their latest round of updates to Windows 11. Now, I did not verify this, but according to the article, which was being very critical of Microsoft doing this kind of stuff, it was apparently very difficult to actually change the default browser in Windows 11 unless you manually went in and reassigned all these file types. And I do know that it's very easy, if you haven't noticed, and you probably have, that whatever browser you're using, the minute you do anything with the system, it immediately pops up Edge. And, of course, that immediately says, would you like to switch me to be your default browser? And I'm like, no, hell no, no. And it immediately made me think of trying to walk my father through switching his browser over the telephone, which got me to subscribe to a remote management tool, which I will not name since they don't pay me to do so. But according to Mozilla, they did implement a way to one-click switch, which it doesn't seem that hard to do in the install, and I think Chrome does that as well, and I think Brave may do that. But even after you do that with Chrome, and I did test that, if you do certain things on the system like search, if you go to the search bar and you search for something and you click one of the web links, guess what? It pops open Edge. And I realized, they're really trying hard to get you to use this. And I mean, I know Big Corp's going to be Big Corp until they get caught. There was a story, I didn't do this story, but there was a story about IBM doing some bad things this week too. But, it's always been like that. So I really wish Microsoft would just stick to making operating systems and leave a searching and browsing marking to others, because they just never seem to have got that. I mean, but they do try really hard. I mean, really, really hard to get you to use their tool. But it's almost automatic, right? I mean, you set up a machine. What's the first thing you do? Use Explorer or Edge to switch to Brave or Chrome or something else. Does anybody use Firefox? Does anybody use Bing? I mean, do you? I don't know. I mean, I use DuckDuckGo, and I have to install it separate. But, I mean, think about that. Talk about bias on my part. I mean, I was setting up a test box the other day, a test box with Windows 10, and it was just a freaking test box. And I automatically, immediately used Edge to install Brave and DuckDuckGo. It's like a built-in Pavlovian response. I'm going to call it Pavlovian avoidance of Microsoft syndrome, which is, what's the acronym? PAMS. That's probably in use. Pavlovian avoidance of Microsoft syndrome. Yeah. All right, this story states the obvious, but it is good to point out. Guess what? Shortages of workers and continual attack scenarios has created anxiety for cybersecurity professionals. Imagine that. I mean, think about that. Being under continual assault and bombardment. And please, kinetic combat vets, despite the analogy, this is not meant to say that it's on the same level as what you've experienced in kinetic war. I mean that. But the analogy is still good. I mean, if you're basically under attack all the time, 24/7, and you're going to get PTSD'd, and management is sending you stuff like the latest round of inspirational posters that say, "Hang in there, baby," or "Higher. We can only achieve when we ache for I and E," or something like that. Well, I mean, you know what I mean. Those posters, and I love this. Included with the latest 100,000 they dropped on the posters, and the 250,000 for the framing of the posters, and the 300,000 for hanging the posters, and that $40 million bonus they paid the CEO for coming up with the poster idea. And then they tell you to work smarter, not harder, in a call from their yacht in the Mediterranean. And yes, that really happened. And that they can't afford to pay more for any additional headcount because security's kind of a cost sink. And that's what they call service departments at companies where the CEO lives on a yacht off the coast of Greece. And no, I'm not bitter. I am. Not in the least. No, I am. But I can really get that this is causing stress to your cybersecurity workforce. I mean, I don't want the company compromised, and I don't want to get fired, and I need the paycheck, and I don't have a yacht off the coast of Greece to retreat to when everything goes south. Well, in this study, and there was other stuff reported here besides all my ranting, 2/3 of the people surveyed that they said that they were understaffed. Imagine that. And 17% of the respondents said it feels like each person is doing 3 people's workload. I was only shocked that it was only 17% of the respondents. I mean, I get calls about this all the time. Do you have any people? Would they be willing to work as interns for free because we don't have any headcount? And you're like, yeah. And so we need to do a better job, and I'm talking to you CEOs and COOs. I know it sucks to have to forego those new round of inspirational plaques so we can maybe hire an extra analyst or two, but try to remember that even though it may not seem like it, tech people do actually occasionally need to sleep, and occasionally maybe, just maybe a little bit. I mean, we're not that sensitive typically, but maybe just a little bit be appreciated instead of being called a cost sink. Maybe just once, maybe, no. Well, maybe thanks for instead of bonuses this year, we decided to create a company pickleball league and signed everyone up for the team. Practices on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, and games are Friday and Saturday nights. Sounds like a blast, and we'll see everybody out there. And then attached to that is the HR note that said attendance is mandatory. Even if you work the evening shift, you can fill those hours in later in the day. I'm not making that one up either. It wasn't quite that bad, and it wasn't pickleball, but you get the idea. Anyway. And finally, 30 years ago, Windows 3.1 arrived on the 6th of April. Yep, that was back when I still looked a lot like Brad Pitt. I kind of still do, but the lighting in here is bad. And, I mean, I could stay up all night writing C code and such. But 3.1 was such a major change to the world because it was the first operating system in the Microsoft world that did away with real mode MS-DOS. Yep. Windows 3.0 was a GUI that sat on top of MS-DOS. So underneath it, you still installed MS-DOS, and then you just installed this tool called Windows 3.0 that was a horrible piece of crap. It took up all your system resources just so you could click on the clown's mouth. And, a lot of this was, of course, like GUIs that work really well on Linux, but it didn't work so well on DOS. But suddenly, you could always dump the GUI and uninstall it, which was the first thing I did when we had Windows 3.0 delivered, was I was like, can we uninstall this GUI and just use the Microsoft DOS? And yes, you can. And so that was the first thing we did, kind of like getting rid of Edge or whatever. But, it was a lot like Linux, so we would just get rid of that and run the command line. But it was honestly the first time I really felt like the Windows operating system thing might fly with end users, because we still ran DOS on all our stuff and the networks and the labs and all that, but this was a big-time change resource-wise and so forth. It also broke the memory barrier. It was the first time on the Microsoft side they were allowing more than 16 megs of RAM, but you did have to install a file called HIMEM.SYS, and you had to get the right one. And it was also the first time I saw embedded malware in the file HIMEM.SYS. So you people were looking for this file, and guess what? People put the file out there, and they actually put malware in it. But this article was like smelling someone smoking a Pall Mall cigarette. Old memories wafting by. Good times. Who knew what was coming next with Windows 95 and such? But that's the news wrap-up for the week of 3 April 2022. I'm Doug White. I'll see you next week on the Security Weekly News.